Imagine standing alone in the suffocating darkness of a hablock underlevel. The air is thick with the metallic stench of stagnant water and ancient rust. Suddenly, you hear it. Not a footstep, but a sound that defies physical logic. It is a high-pitched, agonizing frequency that makes your teeth vibrate in your skull and your eyes water with blood. This is a transonic scream, a horrific auditory phenomenon tearing through the absolute silence like a surgical scalpel through defenseless flesh. You press yourself desperately against the cold metal bulkhead, praying to the god Emperor that whatever is hunting in the shadows will simply pass you by. But human prayer means absolutely nothing to the cold logic of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Through the creeping, polluted fog, a terrifying silhouette finally emerges. It is impossibly tall and unnervingly spindly, moving with a jerky, spider-like grace that is entirely devoid of organic hesitation. To crimson optics ignite in the gloom, locking onto your thermal signature. This is the Sicarian Ruststalker, a horrifying amalgamation of mutilated flesh and ruthless Martian cybernetics. The agonizing frequency you hear is not a vocal battle cry. It is the lethal hum of their transonic blades. These nightmarish weapons do not merely cut through matter. They're metalocalized, resonant field that rapidly adjusts to the exact molecular frequency of your armor, your bones, and your very selves. Within seconds, dense ceramite simply vibrates apart. Before we delve deeper into the terrifying reality of these cybernetic assassins, if you find yourself fascinated by the dark and forgiving truths of the Warhammer 40K universe, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join our ranks. Because the true horror of the Sicarian Ruststalker lies not in the devastating weapons they wield, but in the agonizing, clinical process of their creation. They are the ultimate, horrifying expression of the Mechanicus philosophy. What exactly happens when a loyal Skitarii warrior is entirely too broken to fight, yet still too valuable to simply discard into the corpse starch recycling vats? The tech priests of Mars do not grant the gentle mercy of a quick death. Instead, they clinically harvest what remains, carving away the weakness of the flesh to forge an entity born only for pure slaughter. To understand the Ruststalker, we must look at their origins. Consider this before the transonic scream, before the terrifying spider-like grace. The Sicarian Ruststalker was once a Skitarii. The Skitarii are the frontline cyborg infantry of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the loyal foot soldiers sent to die in the billions for the glory of the machine god. They march across irradiated wastelands and toxic ash wastes, fighting the worst horrors the galaxy can manifest. But they are not indestructible space marines. They bleed. Their cybernetics fill, they break. So, what happens when a Skitarii is fundamentally shattered on the battlefield? In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, the tech priests of Mars operate on a philosophy devoid of human empathy. To them, flesh is inherently weak, an organic flaw meant to be replaced. However, the human brain and the central nervous system are incredibly efficient, organically grown processing units. A forge world, a planet-sized factory dedicated to endless industry, does not waste valuable resources. Therefore, a mortally wounded Skitarii whose body is destroyed, but whose mind remains intact, is not mourned. They are harvested. The selection process for becoming a Sicarian is devoid of honor or glory. It is a terrifying lottery of survival. Imagine a Skitarii warrior whose lower half has been obliterated by an orc explosive, or whose arms and torso have been melted by tyrannid bioacid. As long as the cranium is mostly uncompromised and the spinal column is somewhat salvageable, the tech priests will claim them. They are unceremoniously scraped from the blood-soaked mud, placed into stasis caskets, and shipped back to the sterile, terrifying operating theaters of the Mechanicus. Now, imagine waking up in that theater. The air is thick with the sacred, pungent incense of the Omnissiah, struggling to mask the metallic scent of copper and old blood. Valnu, Hooded Magos biologists hover like vultures, their mechadendrites' robotic tentacles attached to their spines whirring with surgical attachments. You are not given the mercy of anesthesia. The Mechanicus believes that extreme pain stimulates the nervous system, keeping the synapses firing and ensuring the biological components remain highly active during the extensive harvesting procedure. What follows is a systematic, clinical butchery. The tech priests methodically carve away your ruined flesh. The remnants of your original arms and legs are amputated at the joints. Your rib cage is cracked open, and any non-essential organs, lungs, stomach, intestines are callously removed and replaced with compact, highly efficient synthetic alternatives. You are stripped down to the absolute bare minimum required to keep a human brain alive. A brain, a spine, and a beating, heavily augmented heart. You are no longer a soldier. You are sacred meat. But the physical mutilation is only the beginning. The most horrifying aspect of this process is the psychological erasure. As they carve your body, they also invade your mind. Thick neurocables are driven directly into your skull and spinal cord. Your memories of your past life, your comrades, and your own identity are brutally suppressed or entirely wiped clean. In their place, the tech priests upload code, binary kill directives, and extreme aggression protocols. Your human consciousness is drowned out by the deafening static of the machine god's wrath. You are left as a tragic, pulsating core of human nervous tissue, trapped within a stasis vat. The Skitarii you once were is completely dead, but your brain is kept agonizingly alive, vibrating with an artificial, insatiable hunger for violence. You have been reduced to a mere biological battery, a living processor waiting to be plugged into an engine of slaughter. This brings us to the next, horrifying phase of the Mechanicus design, the cruel architecture of your cybernetic rebirth. Now imagine the horrifying moment you are pulled from the stasis vat. The tech priests do not provide a humanoid body for your newly isolated brain and spinal cord. To them, the human form is an inefficient relic of a forgotten past. Instead, they present a skeletal framework of dark, metallic alloys, resembling the spindly, elongated architecture of a predatory insect. This is the Sicarian chassis, an unnerving cage of wires, pistons, and servos designed strictly for the mathematics of murder. The physical integration is a masterclass in agonizing body horror. Your remaining organic spine is not gently laid into the machine. It is violently grafted. Mechanized clamps bite deep into your vertebrae, driving monomolecular neural jacks directly into the marrow. A sudden, blinding surge of artificial electricity violently kickstarts your nervous system. Your brain screams in an agony that transcends organic understanding, as thousands of artificial nerve endings suddenly force their way into your consciousness. Then comes the systemic eradication of your human senses. The soft, vulnerable tissue of your eyes is ruthlessly scooped out, replaced by burning, crimson optical sensors. The world is no longer a place of color and light. It becomes a cold, shifting matrix of thermal signatures, threat assessment algorithms, and trajectory calculations. Your ears are sheared away, replaced by complex audio receptors tuned to register the high-frequency vibrations of armor and the terrified heartbeats of your prey. But the true horror lies in the deprivation of the subtle senses. Your capacity for human taste and smell is entirely surgically removed, deemed a pointless distraction by the Magos biologists. In their place, high-sensitive biochemical sniffers are wired directly into your olfactory bulb. You no longer smell the rain or taste your rations. Instead, your mind is bombarded with the metallic tang of rosolized blood, the distinct chemical signature of adrenaline, and the pheromones of human terror. Next, the tech priests attach the limbs. You are not given hands to hold a weapon or feet to march. Instead, elongated, multi-jointed cybernetic appendages are fused to your remaining shoulder and hip sockets. These legs end in sharp, gripping talons designed to scale vertical bulkheads, while your forearms are permanently fused with the lethal transonic blades. You become a living weapon, incapable of interacting with the universe in any way other than cutting it to pieces. Consider the psychological torture of calibration, as your organic brain attempts to send a simple signal, perhaps trying to flex a long-gone human finger. The cybernetic architecture aggressively intercepts it. Instead of moving a finger, a 2-meter-long transonic blade twitches with lethal force. The phantom limb syndrome you experience is amplified 1,000 times over, a constant, dizzying nausea as your mind struggles to map a human soul onto the body of a mechanical praying mantis. Your internal organs, or what little remains of them, are heavily supplemented. The rhythmic beating of a human heart is replaced by the aggressive, whining hum of a microreactor embedded deep within your metallic chest. Your veins no longer carry warm blood. Instead, they are pumped full of oxygenated, synthetic fluids that burn like liquid fire, designed to keep your biological tissue hyperactive and resistant to the extreme gravitational forces of your new and natural speed. To seal you inside this nightmare, the faceless mask is applied. Whatever recognizable human features you still possessed: a jaw, cheekbones, a brow are locked away behind a blank, terrifying faceplate. This visor serves a dual purpose. It acts as an armored bulkhead for your fragile brain, and it houses the agonizing sonic projectors that emit the Ruststalker's signature, nerve-shredding scream. You are now entirely anonymous, a faceless ghost trapped within the machine. Throughout this excruciating process, heavy chemical cocktails are pumped directly into your cerebral cortex. These are not anesthetics. They are aggressive combat stims and hyperadrenal synthetics designed to keep you in a perpetual state of terrifying alertness. The pain of the surgery is never truly erased. It is simply repurposed. The tech priests rewire your pain receptors so that the agony of your existence transforms into a violent, buzzing kinetic energy that violently demands physical release. You are then forcefully connected to the noosphere, the invisible, data-heavy network of the Mechanicus. The crushing weight of collective machine consciousness slams into your isolated mind. You are bombarded with endless streams of binary code, scrap logic, and the cold and feeling tactical directives of your handlers. Your internal monologue is entirely drowned out by the deafening, religious static of the Omnissiah's will. You are no longer an individual. You are a localized node of calculated violence. What is it truly like inside the Tarnate skull? It is a state of perpetual, suffocating claustrophobia. You are fully awake, your organic brain processing every agonizing second. Yet you have absolutely no control over the horrific actions your new body is about to perform. You are an imprisoned passenger behind your own eyes, forced to watch as the targeting reticles lock onto your former human allies or terrified civilians, unable to close your eyes or look away. When the final neural lock engages, the cruel architecture of your cybernetic rebirth is complete. The tech priests step back from the operating table, their megadendrites twitching in cold satisfaction. The entity that rises from the slab is no longer the Skitarii who fell on the battlefield. It is a towering, twitching nightmare of rusted metal, bloody fluid, and transonic resonance. The transformation is an absolute triumph of Martian engineering and a complete atrocity against the human soul. The Adeptus Mechanicus have successfully recycled a broken tool, forging it into something infinitely more lethal and entirely devoid of mercy. You are now a Sicarian Ruststalker, a creature of pure, mathematical slaughter, ready to be unleashed into the darkest corners of the galaxy. But the nightmare of your creation is merely the prologue. The true horror begins when this terrifying architecture is finally driven by the ghost trapped within the machine instinct, where your lingering humanity is forcefully weaponized against the enemies of the forged world. To truly understand the horror of the Sicarian Ruststalker, we must ask a fundamental, chilling question. If the Adeptus Mechanicus despises the weakness of flesh so entirely, why do they bother utilizing a human brain at all? Why not simply construct an automaton, a machine driven purely by artificial intelligence? The answer lies in the darkest, most terrifying taboo of the Martian priesthood, the absolute. Religious prohibition against the abominable intelligence. They remember the catastrophic rebellion of the men of iron, and they will never again trust a machine that can think for itself. Instead, they rely on the most sophisticated, organically grown processing unit in the galaxy, the human brain. The Magos biologists understand that a biological consciousness, when properly subjugated and heavily augmented, possesses an unparalleled capacity for dynamic threat assessment and spatial reasoning. You are not preserved out of any lingering respect for your humanity. You are preserved because your neuroplasticity makes you a phenomenally efficient piece of biological wetware. You are a living targeting cogitator, capable of processing the chaotic, unpredictable variables of a battlefield far better than any synthetic algorithm. But this clinical efficiency comes with a terrifying psychological cost. Despite the aggressive memory wipes and the invasive lobotomies, the fragment of your original consciousness almost always remains. This is the ghost in the machine instinct. The tech priests do not entirely extinguish your awareness because a completely hollowed out mind loses its instinctual edge, its deeply ingrained survival reflexes. They need the primal, human instinct to hunt, to react, and to survive. But they strip away everything that makes those instincts meaningful. You are left with the raw, agonizing emotion of pure survival, weaponized into aggression. Consider the absolute nightmare of this lingering awareness. You are just conscious enough to understand what you have become, but utterly powerless to stop it. As your cybernetic limbs twitch and your transonic blades power up, you feel the horrifying disconnect between your will and your actions. The ghost inside the armored shell silently screams in protest as you march toward the enemy lines, trapped in a metallic cage that was built from your own mutilated remains. It is a psychological imprisonment that defies any human comprehension. If this exploration into the macabre philosophy of the Adeptus Mechanicus is shifting your perspective on the grim darkness of the far future, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We are constantly delving into the most disturbing, hidden truths of the Warhammer 40K universe, and your support allows us to keep decoding these terrifying realities. Now, let us return to the dark heart of the Forged world and examine how this psychological torment is actively weaponized on the battlefield. The tech priests actively utilize this localized trauma. The ghost in the machine is not merely a tragic byproduct. It is a vital component of the Ruststalker's terrifying combat efficiency. The continuous phantom limb pain, the agonizing chemical stims, and the absolute deprivation of human senses create a state of perpetual, vibrating fury. You are constantly suffering, and the neural inhibitors programmed by your Martian handlers ensure that the only way to alleviate this localized, synthetic agony is through the kinetic release of extreme violence. You are plugged into the noosphere, the invisible network of binary data that dictates the will of the Omnissiah. Through this connection, your handlers feed your torment. They adjust the chemical flows in your brain, spiking your adrenaline and suppressing your cognitive reasoning right before an engagement. The static of scrap code floods your mind, drowning out your internal screaming with the cold, mathematical directives of the Magos. You do not fight because you hate the enemy. You fight because the machine compels you, and because the act of slaughter is your only permitted release. This is the ultimate, horrifying irony of the Sicarian Ruststalker. The Adeptus Mechanicus preaches the purity of the machine and the inherent weakness of the flesh. Yet their most lethal assassins are entirely dependent on the suffering of a trapped human soul. You are an instrument of divine logic, powered by the most rational, agonizing depths of organic trauma. This twisted fusion of cold cybernetics and burning human agony prepares us for the actual, terrifying application of this weapon. The Transonic symphony of slaughter. The agonizing psychological torment we have just explored is not a static condition. It is the volatile fuel for your true purpose. Let us transition from the sterile, bloody operating theaters of Mars to the suffocating, rusted underbelly of a rebel hive city. You are deployed into a chaotic combat zone where heavily fortified heretic positions have stalled the Skitarii advance. The Magos does not send you into the open field. Instead, you are directed into the claustrophobic labyrinth of industrial ventilation shafts, a dark, vertical world where gravity means nothing to your mechanical claws. Clinging to a vertical ferrocrete wall, you wait in the absolute darkness. You cannot see the flickering lumen strips or smell the toxic smog. Instead, your world is a terrifying matrix of data. Your thermal optics paint the surrounding structure in cold blues, while the heat signatures of the rebel soldiers below burn in bright, ignorant reds. Your chemical sniffers taste the distinct, metallic aerosol of their sweat and the sharp tang of their fear. The neural inhibitors suppress your internal screaming, converting your agony into a tightly coiled kinetic tension. When the binary kill command finally flashes across your consciousness, you do not leap, you simply fall. But it is a calculated, terrifying descent. Your cybernetic joints articulate with a sickening, spider-like grace, allowing you to rebound off the narrow shaft walls with impossible momentum. You hit the metal grating of the rebel bunker at a speed that would shatter organic bones, yet your shock-absorbing servos take the impact flawlessly. Before the heretics can even raise their autoguns, you are already moving among them, a blur of rusted metal and crimson optics. Then, the Transonic symphony begins. You do not swing your blades with brutal, hacking force like an orc or a space marine. The horrific weapons fused to your forearms emit that signature, teeth-rattling scream. As you strike, the blades instantly calibrate to the molecular density of the enemy's flak armor. They do not merely pierce the hardened ceramite, they vibrate through it. A rebel soldier attempts to block your strike with a heavy iron stubber, but the transonic resonance simply passes right through the metal casing, violently liquefying his internal organs before the blade even breaks his skin. It is an absolute massacre, executed with terrifying, clinical precision. Blood sprays across your featureless faceplate, but your chemical sensors register it only as a successful termination metric. And throughout this entire symphony of slaughter, the organic ghost trapped inside your armored skull is forced to watch every horrific detail. You feel the sickening vibration of bone giving way to your blades, and you register the raw terror in the eyes of the dying. But your cybernetic programming ruthlessly overrides any lingering sense of human pity or physical hesitation. Within seconds, the bunker is completely reduced to a silent slaughterhouse. The Skitarii advance can now safely continue over the mutilated remains of the enemy. But for you, the Sicarian Ruststalker, there is absolutely no sense of victory or relief. The moment the combat algorithms disengage, the agonizing phantom pain and the chemical burn of your synthetics violently flood back into your isolated brain. The brief, violent release is over, and the suffocating torment returns, leaving you vibrating with an artificial hunger for the next kill. This endless cycle of violence leads us to question the true nature of your service. When the blood settles and the transonic blades finally power down, we must confront a deeply disturbing philosophical question. The Adeptus Mechanicus claims that the creation of a Sicarian Ruststalker is an act of divine ascension, a glorious elevation from the weakness of flesh. But is this truly devotion to the machine god? Or is it merely the most absolute, terrifying form of physical enslavement disguised as religious dogma? To understand this hypocrisy, consider the concept of autonomy within the Martian priesthood. High-ranking Magos actively choose to replace their organs with sacred cybernetics, viewing each amputation as a step closer to divine purity. They willingly sacrifice their humanity in exchange for a cold, calculated immortality. But the Sicarian is never afforded this choice. Their transformation is not a religious pilgrimage. It is a violent, non-consensual recycling process. You did not march into the operating theater chanting binary prayers of your own free will. You were dragged there as a shattered casualty of war, a broken asset too valuable to throw away. The tech priests did not ask for your soul. They surgically dismantled it. The illusion of your holy devotion shatters the moment you realize that your entire existence as a Ruststalker is built upon a foundation of absolute, undeniable force. Consider the religious static that perpetually floods your isolated brain. The endless streams of scrap code and synthesized hymns are not a source of spiritual enlightenment. They are a highly sophisticated mechanism of cognitive control, designed to actively suppress your lingering humanity. They ensure that your immense suffering and agonizing phantom pain are channeled solely in a direction that benefits the strategic goals of the Forge. World, what does it truly mean to be devoted when you possess absolutely no free will? The Mechanicus demands unyielding loyalty from its creations, yet they systematically remove the neurological capacity for genuine faith. They replace human conviction with a hardwired, chemical obedience, fundamentally confusing the terrified compliance of a chained animal with the righteous zeal of a holy crusader. It is a calculated, terrifying deception. This exposes the dark, bleeding heart of Martian philosophy. They worship logic, efficiency, and the sacred acquisition of knowledge, but their practical methods are deeply rooted in dogmatic cruelty. The brutal, agonizing construction of a Ruststalker is not an elevation of the fragile human condition. It is its ultimate, clinical degradation, cleverly masked beneath the aesthetic of holy mechanical purity and religious reverence. On the battlefield, you are heralded as a sacred assassin, a divine instrument of the Omnissiah's wrath brought fully to life. Yet, beneath the layers of rusted ablative armor and the deafening hum of your transonic weaponry, you are nothing more than an enslaved, heavily mutilated victim. Your very existence is a profound blasphemy against the human spirit that the wider Imperium supposedly fights to protect. The grim reality of the 41st millennium is that the Adeptus Mechanicus does not create saints or heroes. They manufacture terrifying monsters to fight other, even worse monsters. The Sicarian Ruststalker stands as the perfect, tragic embodiment of this cold truth. You are forever trapped in a religious nightmare, forced to commit unspeakable atrocities in the name of a mechanical god who only values the clinical efficiency of your eternal slaughter. But what happens when the battlefield finally falls completely silent? When an Adeptus Astartes concludes a campaign, they are met with glorious honors, hymns of victory, and the sacred brotherhood of their chapter. Even a standard Skitarii is afforded a basic cycle of rest and mechanical maintenance. But for a Sicarian Ruststalker, there is no victory parade, no brotherhood, and absolutely no rest. The moment the final enemy is eliminated, the binary kill command is abruptly withdrawn. You are unceremoniously herded back into the cold, vibrating belly of a Mechanicus macrolander, treated not as a victorious warrior, but as a dangerous, volatile piece of ordnance. As the heavy blast doors seal shut, the aggressive combat stims begin to violently crash. The fiery, kinetic energy that fueled your slaughter evaporates, replaced instantly by the agonizing, hollow ache of your phantom limbs. You are left standing in the pitch black, a twitching nightmare alone with your trapped consciousness. Upon returning to the Forge world, or the orbital staging grounds, you are not given quarters. You are marched directly into the suffocating chill of the maintenance crypts. Heavy, mechanized servitors lock your metallic frame into rigid diagnostic racks. You feel the invasive, violating pressure of diagnostic cables forcefully penetrating your neural ports. They do not ask for your comfort, as they aggressively flush your synthetic blood and weld fresh ablative armor directly over your sensory receptors. Then comes the most terrifying phase of your existence, the stasis cycle. The tech priests do not require your mind to be active when you're not actively killing. Heavy, freezing cryogenic fluids are pumped rapidly into your life support casket. You feel your biological heart physically slow, the mechanical reactor in your chest winding down to a barely perceptible, agonizing hum. But the ghost in the machine never truly falls asleep. You are simply paralyzed, trapped in an endless, freezing void. In this frozen, suspended animation, time loses all organic meaning. A week, a decade, or a standard imperial century could pass while you hang suspended in the dark. Your only companion is the monotonous, echoing drip of the cryogenic fluids and the faint, religious static of the forged world's dormant data streams. This is the absolute, terrifying erasure of your soul. You are completely stripped of your past, your future, and your present reality. You are no longer a living being participating in the grand, tragic narrative of the cosmos. You are simply a weapon hanging in a dark armory, waiting for the hand of the Omnissiah to wield you once more. You do not truly live. You merely exist in those brief, violently bloody intervals between your endless cycles of freezing isolation. This grim reality leaves us with one final, unavoidable conclusion regarding the true cost of the Mechanicus philosophy. We must ultimately look upon the Sicarian Ruststalker not merely as a weapon of war, but as a chilling monument to the core philosophy of the Adeptus Mechanicus. They represent the terrifying absolute of the Martian dogma. When flesh is viewed as nothing more than a flawed, replaceable resource, and humanity is reduced to a simple metric of biological efficiency, the result is a nightmare of endless, calculated mutilation. The Ruststalker blurs the line between man and machine so entirely that neither truly survives. What remains is a horrifying amalgamation, a ghost eternally trapped within an agonizing shell of rusted metal and transonic resonance. Consider the sheer tragedy of their existence the next time you hear the grand tales of the Imperium's survival. The galaxy is held together not just by the courage of the Space Marines or the sheer numbers of the Imperial Guard, but by the unspeakable, non-consensual sacrifices of the broken. The tech priests of Mars do not save the shattered Skitarii. They merely recycle their torment, weaponizing their lingering, agonizing humanity to stave off the encroaching darkness of the 41st millennium. In the universe where there is only war, the Mechanicus proves that there are fates far worse than death. Death is a release. The machine is an eternal prison. If this deep dive into the agonizing reality of the Sicarian Ruststalker has altered your perspective on the Adeptus Mechanicus, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below. What dark corner of the Warhammer 40K universe should we decode next? If you are hungry for more terrifying lore, check out our previous video detailing the horrifying reality of becoming a servitor, displayed right here on screen. Until next time, remember, the flesh is weak, but the machine is absolutely merciless.